Exodus chapter 17. Let me read and come with me. I'm going to start at verse 8. Verse 8. And this is what it says. I'm going to read the remainder of the chapter. So it says, Then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said unto Joshua, Choose out men and go and fight. And fight with Amalek. For tomorrow I will go and stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses had said, and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. And it came to pass when Moses held up his hand that Israel prevailed, and when his hands fell down, Amalek prevailed. And Moses' hands were very heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat therein. And Aaron and Hur stayed his hands up, one on one side and the other on the other side. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua discomforted Amalek with his people and with the edge of the sword. And the Lord said unto Moses, Write this for a memorial in a book, and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua. For I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar and called it the name Jehovah Nissi. For he said, Because the Lord has sworn that he will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. Father, tonight take your word, speak it to your people's hearts, bless them and encourage them and challenge us all. Help us, Lord, understand this chapter. Help us understand the significance in the day that we live. And Father, speak through me. Lord, let this not just be a thought from Pastor Lee. Let this be a word from God himself into the hearts of your people. Stir your people up, Lord. Shake them up, for the day in which we live is evil. And Lord, your people need strength. So Lord, help them and encourage them and help them understand where they're at in their lives at the minute and take them from strength to strength in Jesus' precious name. Amen. This word jumped out at me through the week with this thought when I read this passage. And I want you tonight, I want you to evaluate, and I want you to honestly look at your life. I'm not interested really so much in the person beside you or in front of you. This is not about the person beside you or in front of you. This is about you. It's about no one else. And I want you to see yourself in this entire passage that I just read. Because here's what I've seen in this passage. There are certain types of people and types of groups that are all in this one passage. And the question for you tonight is this. Where are you in your Christian or spiritual life? Where are you? What position do you find yourself in? And let me say, you could be in one or more of these positions, but you'll be prominently in one. And for everyone that is here tonight, I believe God has you here for this purpose, to hear this message. God has you here to speak to your heart and to encourage you. There are certain groups in this passage, and here's what they are. There was those that were not ready for battle. I mean, listen to that. They were those that were not ready for battle. There were those that were ready for battle. They were those that were leaders. There were those that prayed, and there were those that were supporters, and there was those that were left behind to stay in the camp. Did you get that? There was those not ready for battle. Some ready for battle. Some that were leaders. Those that prayed. Those that supported. And those that stayed behind to look after the camp. Here's what I want you to see. Moses knew there was a fight coming. Leaders usually know when a fight is on the way. Moses says to Joshua, Joshua, go through the people and pick out soldiers. Now here's what that tells me. Moses knew that now listen, here's what you got to understand. Joshua had never been in a fight before. This was his first military command. This was the first fight that they had after deliverance from Egypt. And you got to remember, the last time an army came at them, they run. God had to deliver them at the Red Sea. The last army that came at them, God himself destroyed them. This time, God is saying, you fight them. And folks, here's a lesson. There's some things God will deliver you from, and there's some things he will say to you, you fight. You fight. He will not deliver you from everything. He will say to you, you fight your own 2 feet. And he says to Joshua, Joshua, go through and pick out soldiers. And here's what that tells me. Joshua needed to go and pick out soldiers. And this is not a criticism to those that weren't ready. But there was some men that just weren't ready for the fight. And here's the thing about a soldier. Here's the thing about a military commander. When you're going into battle, when you're going into fight for your life, you want to know that the man or the woman beside you can fight. Amen. You don't want the man or woman beside you that when an onslaught's coming in front of you, you don't want them to turn and run. And some of them, listen, didn't go to battle maybe because they were too young. Some of them weren't skilled enough. Some of them didn't have the heart. Some of them didn't have the fight. Some of them didn't have the battle. Some of them were just immature. But whatever the reason was, excuse me, Matt, you're just distracting me, mate, there, sorry. Whatever the reason was, whatever was going on in the life of men and women, particularly men at this time, some of them weren't ready. And here's what I would ask you tonight. Some of them weren't ready with a legitimate reason. Too young, not skilled, didn't know how to handle a sword, didn't know how to fight properly, maybe just didn't have the courage. Some of them had a legitimate reason. Some of them didn't have a legitimate reason. Some of them should have been on the battlefield, and they weren't. Some of them Moses should have been able to pick, and he couldn't. Why? Maybe they were lazy. Maybe their heart wasn't in the fight. Maybe their heart wasn't in fighting for Israel. Maybe their heart wasn't in fighting for the things of God. And folks, here's what I've learned in the Christian life. I'm saved 20 years, and here's what I've come to learn about ministry, about this fight, about spiritual. There is some people that should be ready and aren't. You're saved years, and you can't fight. You know, like they used to say in school, he can't fight. But listen, there's some of you saved years and you can't fight. Why? Because you have allowed things in your life to stop you being effective for the purpose of God. No sustainability. Not willing to deal with sin. Not willing to deal with habits. Not willing to deal with areas of your life that you should. And when your leader comes and says to you, I need you to fight, then he realizes, I can't use you. It's the most frustrating thing as a leader. When he looks across his army and his people and he says, I want to use you, but I can't. Because you won't deal with some stuff in your life. You can't be planted. You have no sustainability. You're not trustworthy. All of them things. And Joshua goes and he begins to look across all these men and he asks himself the question, who can fight with me? Who can stand the ground with me? Joshua knew there was some not ready for a battle. And folks, maybe you're saying tonight, I'm not ready for a battle. It doesn't have to stop there. You can say tonight, when the next fight comes along, and believe me, there's going to be another fight. When the next fight comes along, I'm going to be ready for Joshua. I'm going to have my boots polished. I'm going to have my sword ready. I'm going to have my shield ready. I'm going to have the helmet on. And I'm going to be standing when Joshua's looking at his next line of soldiers. I'm going to be standing there saying, Joshua, pick me. It doesn't have to be. You're never ready. Some people I know will go through their Christian life and they'll never be ready. I'm not saying they're not saved. They'll just never be ready for their leader to come and call upon them because they're not willing to deal with some stuff. Then there were soldiers. When Joshua came to those men that Moses asked him, Joshua says, I need you, and I need you, and I need you. Because he knew that they were ready for the fight. Joshua knew that when they were going against the Amaleks, he knew that we were ready to take these men to fight. And folks, there is nothing so glorious in battle when you know the person beside you is willing to fight for you and with you. When you're on the mission field, when you're together in the fight, when you're in the struggle and the fight of your life, it is good to look round and see who's beside you and know that you can count on that person and that individual. It is good to know that there's a soldier willing to fight the same cause as you. There's a soldier willing to fight along with you. There's nothing worse when you get a soldier or two soldiers and say we're fighting for two different things. It doesn't work. You draw apart, you'll not fight together, you'll not fight in unison together. And Joshua knew that there were soldiers that were willing to fight for him. Soldiers that were ready to go onto the battlefield. Soldiers that were willing and knowing that they might even get wounded. Folks, listen. No soldier goes to war with naivety. Every soldier that goes to war knows this one thing: I could die out there. Every soldier knows there's a chance that I could lose a limb. Every soldier knows there's a chance that I could get wounded. And yet still, Joshua knew they were ready for the fight. Do you ever remember the passage in Scripture where Paul the Apostle sent away John Mark? And you know that passage? He sent him away because he felt that you're not ready for the fight. And Barnabas takes him under his wing and encourages him. There was a day that Paul needed John Mark again. But at that particular time, Paul says, you're not ready. And folks, listen, there's times in ministry when you need to look at the people that's with you. And you need to look at them and say, are you ready? And you've got to make a judgment call. You've got to make a judgment call. Is this person willing to fight for me and with me? And so he brings in soldiers. Then we come to the leader. We come to the leader who is Moses. And Moses stands and says to Joshua, Joshua, I need you to pick out men. And here's where we need to look at Joshua for a moment. Because Joshua looks at Moses and he trusted his leader. He believed in Moses. He honored Moses. He was a friend of Moses. And Moses says to him, I need you to pick out these men. And here's the thing about Joshua. He trusted and obeyed his leader. Now get that. Because here's usually what we find in the vast majority of the Christian church. No one wants to come under leadership or authority. Every time their leader or pastor says something wrong to them, do you know what usually happens? They bolt. In fact, what do you call that wee thing used to be on the TV? Roadrunner. They're faster than him. They're away, the dust is gone. You're standing there going, that was quick. What? Because, and you know what that is? Rebellion. It's rebellion. And you know what the Bible says about rebellion? It is as is witchcraft. If you cannot come under authority, you have a rebellious spirit and you are dabbling as witchcraft. That is what happens when people cannot come under authority and leadership. Joshua was not of that mindset, folks. He said to Moses, I'm ready. I'm going to be beside you. I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to believe in you, Moses, and we're going into this together. There is nothing more important to a leader, to a pastor and an evangelist, and someone has put a penny in my water. I don't, well, I can guess who that was. This morning I went to take a drink and there was an orange marker in it. Someone trying to poison me. What was I saying there? Moses, there's nothing more important for a leader that he knows that there's those that will fight with him and for him. When a leader is down and knows the battle that is before him, there is nothing more important to him than men and women that will stay beside him. You can never underestimate, and listen to me, folks, because I've seen it. I've seen so many pastors wounded and discouraged because men and women walk out on them. They just get up and go. You don't know the heartache of what that does to a pastor. You don't know the heartache that it does to a pastor when he sees a seat empty and he knows that that person should be in it. He knows, listen, he knows where people sit. And when he looks across the crowd and he sees them not there, his heart bleeds. And he will ask himself many questions. Could have done more. And listen, there's sometimes in life and sometimes in ministry, and listen, let me be the first to say this. There's sometimes in life and in ministry when people move on and God intends them to move on, we're the first ones to rejoice, by the way. We're the first ones to say, go and fulfill what God has called you to do. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when people just get up and go and leave you. And when you're going into battle, the heart that Moses must have been encouraged with to know that, Joshua, I'm with you. I'm with you. And so as he goes and he sees this leader is with him, he goes and he does what he needs him to do. And he looks. And then I want to talk about these for a minute. Those that had to stay behind to look after the camp. Sometimes we forget about those that stay behind. Because not everybody's called to battle. Not everybody's called to be a soldier. Not everybody's called to be generals and leaders. But there is some of us that are called just to look after the camp. Because if they didn't look after the camp, listen, the soldiers would have no camp to come back to. And folks, listen, what we have got to understand is this. If we don't have people that's looking after the camp, listen, sometimes when we go out and outreach on a Thursday night or that, and we come back, you know what's lovely? When there's a wee cup of tea ready. And a wee bun ready for you. Do you understand what I'm saying? Or there's a nice bit of hot food or somewhere. You come out from a cold night. I love at times when I come out from a cold night of outreach and I come home and the fire's lit. And I sit down on the settee and I sit by the fire. This is glorious. Did you understand? Because you need people to stay behind to look after the camp. And you ought to be, and I ought to be, inspired and encouraged that there's people praying. There's people looking after. There's people keeping the lights on. There's people keeping the heating on. There's people looking after. There's people looking after the kids. There's people looking after the family. There's people looking after people that are wounded and that are sick. And listen, there's no one that goes to war without a medic's camp. Every time there's a war goes up, there's a Red Cross goes up. Because people get wounded. And when soldiers get wounded, they need a camp to go back to. And if you get wounded, folks, and listen, if you're a soldier and you're out and you're fighting and you're in this spiritual battle, you're out doing whatever you're doing. Listen, when you get wounded, you want to be able to go back to a camp where people can come around you, put their arm around you and say to you, listen, let's pray. If you don't have that, you're isolated and you're alone. And so, thank God for those that need to stay behind. Thank God for those that have a heart for the church of God to pray for soldiers that go onto the battlefield. Now we come to Moses. Moses says this, Joshua, while you're fighting, and here's, listen, where we have to be careful. While you're fighting, I'm going to be up the mountaintop praying. Now Joshua could have said to Moses, and had made almost every right to say, what? While we're fighting, you're going up the mountain? Folks, it doesn't make sense. While we're engaged in war, you're just going to go up the mountain and what? Pray? You see, this is where sometimes we lose the value of people that pray. As Moses is up praying, he's saying, yes, I'm going to pray. It almost seems as if Moses is trying to get out of the fight. It almost seems as if Moses is saying, I'm taking the easier part. But what you've got to understand is this: he wasn't taking the easier part. He was saying, Joshua, unless I go up the mountain and intercede for yous will not prevail. And folks, you know what I've learned? I thank God for the times I've been on the mission field and people have been fighting in prayer for me. I thank God for the times when I've been weak in my fight, when I have struggled in health, when I have struggled in spirituality, that there's been people standing on the mountaintop saying, I'm praying for you, that you'll prevail. I thank God for the sons and daughters that are trapped in addiction. That Davy decided to say, we're going to pray for mums and dads who are dying and have sons and daughters dying in addiction. Only if they ever knew the importance. Thank God for the churches that say that we're praying for our community that is steeped in drug addiction, paramilitaries, and heartache. Maybe that community never values what a church really does. Only eternity will determine the value. But thank God for the churches or the people that pray. Now Moses goes up and he prays. And listen to what it says. It says, as Moses' hands were in the air, the people of God prevailed. But when his hands went down, the people of God didn't prevail. In other words, Amalek seemed to get the victory. And here's what I need you to learn. There is every time in a leader's life. And I'm not just talking about myself, I'm talking about leader, I'm talking about even you as a family, as a parent, as a mom, as a dad, as a leader of your household. There's even times when leaders get tired. Because there's times when leaders can go up the mountain and we're full of vigor and we're full of strength, and we get to the mountain and we have in our minds, I'm just going to stand here and I'm going to pray all night. Listen, you get about 20 minutes in and it feels like all night. You ever been there? And then you go to why did I put this sort of burden on myself? You see, there's times we go up with such vigor, such energy, such enthusiasm. And Moses went up, and Moses soon realized, listen, you try having your hands up. Try 5 minutes. They'll start to become like lead. We can't even really do it for 5 minutes in worship. Oh, right, my hands are, oh. Moses seen the battle. Moses seen the fight. Everything within him was screaming, keep your hands in the air, Moses. Keep your hands in the air, because if you don't, Israel will be defeated. Everything was screaming at him. And here's the lesson. Sometimes leaders get unbelievably tired holding everybody else up. And that is not a criticism on leaders. That is the reality that sometimes we can forget. Sometimes we forget and look around. And sometimes when the leader's arms are by his side, we begin to criticize them. Oh, he should be. Well, that's the wonder statement. He should be. They should be. Do you ever stop to think that leaders get tired? That they're not superhuman, that they're men and women of flesh, that are wounded just like everybody else, and Moses was no different. Moses got tired because Moses was a man. Moses comes to this point, and up to this point, and this is why I ask you, what's your position? Up to this point, we never heard of Aaron and Hur until. Now listen to this. Until. While Moses could keep his hands up, you never heard of anybody else. The moment his hands went down, all of a sudden 2 people come into the picture. One called Aaron and one called Hur. And here's what it says. And when Moses' hands were heavy, they took a stone. Now listen to this. Moses never took the stone. Moses never looked for a stone. It says they took a stone. And they held his hands up. God had, at the right moment, at the right time, 2 men. God knows everything you're going through. He knows every battle you face. And he knew that it was no coincidence that 2 men needed to go up a mountain with Moses. Do you know what pride can allow you to do? Don't worry about it. I don't need you. Sure, you stay at the bottom. I'll go up the top. That's what pride does. Pride stops you from receiving help. God had 2 men. And when they seen that their servant and their leader was tired and wounded and broken, they said to him, Moses, let us get you a stone. I want you to sit down. Oh, what a lovely picture of people in the church that recognize the need of a leader. They didn't say to him, Moses, wise up. Keep your hands in the air. If you don't keep your hands in there, they didn't criticize him. They didn't say, Moses, you're failing us. They didn't say, Moses, you're an embarrassment. They didn't say, Moses, you can't be the leader anymore. They said, Moses, let us get you a seat to sit down and let us share the burden. Let us help you. And Moses, with pride, could have said, don't worry about it. But he didn't. He stepped back and he received the help. He took the seat, he sat on it, and these 2 great men, one on either side, lifted his hands up and took the share of the burden for the purpose of the victory. Too many people want the victory to themselves. These 2 men says, Moses, we want to help you. We want to fight with you. We want to share the burden. Folks, can I ask you, when was the last time you shared the burden for somebody? When was the last time? And I'm not talking about just those who you like. Because it's easy to share a burden with those you like. What about someone you don't really like? We really don't like to talk about that in a Christian church. What about those who irritate us and annoy us and are just a wee bit OTT? You know them sort of people? You know, I could name a few of them people. What about people that come on and they're great leaders? They're great leaders, but they're sometimes not great friends. What about people that need your support? That need your finances? Oh, God, I'm not giving to him. I'm not giving to that ministry. I'm not helping them out. Why not? Why not lift their hands up for a wee while? Oh, they don't deserve a hamper. They don't deserve a food parcel. They don't deserve my time. Folks, you may not think that there are real things. I'm telling you, in the Christian church, there are real things. Imagine your leader, you come into your leader, your pastor, your ministry, or someone that is saying, I'll help you. Imagine they came and said to you, well, you don't really deserve my time. You don't deserve my effort. You don't deserve what I can do for you. Folks, when was the last time that we took somebody's arms and we lifted them up? Or we took a seat and we set it under them and we said, there is no embarrassment or no shame in sitting down for a wee minute. Let us help you. And I'm not here to blow my own trumpet by any means. I just count it a privilege that I have been able in my life to help many people by lifting their arms and putting a seat under them and saying, let me help you. Sometimes it isn't much. Sometimes it's even as simple as a coffee. Sometimes it is even as simple as a fiver. Sometimes it is even as simple as saying, let me put some electric in your flat or some gas in your meter. Let me for a wee while hold your hands up. Let me. Sometimes it can be bigger. Sometimes it can be greater. Sometimes it demands more time. Sometimes it demands more effort. Sometimes it demands more finances. But listen, what about we get the heart of these two men more than anything that I've said to you about position? Because if we get to the place that we can support one another, I can guarantee you that the Christian church will have a great name. Rather than criticize, what is the phrase they used to say of us at times? It is only the Christian church that buries their wounded. Let's change that. Let's be a people that says, listen, how can I help and support you rather than criticize you? And folks, listen, there's not everybody I agree with. But listen, not everybody agrees with me. Should that really stop us encouraging and helping one another? You know, you think it should be painted white? I think it should be painted white. You know, sometimes somebody said to me it should be painted another colour. Well, I don't care. I win. I'm the leader. But you know what I mean? We're not going to fall out over it. You know, and when you get to the leader, you can paint it whatever colour you want. Until that time, I'm in charge. But you understand what I mean? Let's encourage. Let's strengthen the hand of one another. Let's lift one another up. And I want to finish on two examples, and I am finished. Him who was known as the captain of the Lord of hosts, Jesus Christ, came, could have stayed in glory, could have done away with us and says, let them rot. Do you know what it says in the Gospels? He came not to be served, but to serve. He lifted the hands of others. He put a rock underneath them. He encouraged them. He helped them. He lifted the hands of the feeble and the weak. He reached the poor and the blind. He came to serve. He came to minister. He came to reach the less fortunate. He didn't come to heal, to rescue the whole, but the sick. That was his mission. He came to seek and to save the lost. And then I think of another man, Paul the Apostle, one of the greatest leaders in the Christian church, the man that penned half of the New Testament, a man who became the pinnacle of a leader within the church, the pinnacle of a leader. Probably one of the greatest leaders in the church. And folks, listen, your circumstances do not dictate your servanthood. You listen to that. Your circumstances do not dictate your servanthood. Because even when Paul, who preached to the thousands, preached to the one, done miracles, seen the sick, the dead raised, seen all sorts of miracles, raised the dead himself, seen everything that ministry could offer, finds himself in a prison. Finds himself in a prison. And still, here's his heart. How can I support the church of God? How can I support the church of God? You know what he says? Get me a pen and paper, because I'm going to write a few letters. And there he writes the epistles to the church. Why? That we may sit on them, and that they may lift our hands up. Do not ever tell me your circumstances dictate your servanthood. Paul was about to die, and still he could write, I love him. Still he could write, for me to live is Christ, but to die is gain. Still he could write, the love of God, the height, the depth, the width, no powers, no principalities, nothing can separate me from the love of God. You see, what you've got to understand, I don't really suffer whingers too much. I don't suffer them. Because when I look at the likes of Paul the Apostle, and I hear excuses after excuse of why people can't come to church, why they can't go to a prayer meeting, why they can't go to outreach, I say to you, dribble. Stop, put a bib on. You know, stop dribbling. Do you know what I'm saying? Come on. Come on. Even when you're in hospital, even when you're dying, even when you're in your last breath, still Christ can be glorified. Still, you can be a witness no matter where you're at, even in prison. Joseph was in prison. Your circumstances do not dictate your position. So what am I saying? Here's what I'm asking. What's your position? And let me tell you, just like Paul and just like Jesus, your position can change. You can still be a great leader, but in prison. You can still be a great leader, but on the mission field. You can be a great leader in your house, and in your family. You can be a great leader in your workplace, in your circumstances. You can be a great leader in your street. Wherever. Testimony. But don't be this one, and I'm finished. Don't be the one that when Moses sent Joshua out to pick the soldiers, that Joshua couldn't pick you because you wouldn't deal with some stuff. That is the one that the Lord is the most severe on. Do you remember the parable where he came and he says, when he gave them the talents, the one that he was hard on was the one that buried his talent and never used it. That is the one that when you stand at the bema, God Almighty will ask you, what did you do with what I have given you for this life? And if it's wood, hay and stubble, it's up in smoke. Don't be that Christian. Be the one that matures. And when Joshua comes around again and says, are you ready? You've got both hands up. In fact, you've got both hands, fingers and toes up. You're saying, I'm ready. I'm ready to fight with you.